Where's my snare? I have no snare in my headphones. There you go. Yeah. Yo. Have you ever been hated or discriminated against?
All right.
I have.
Welcome to the Young Turks. We got a kick-ass week ahead for you guys. Guns blazing, as you're going to see right from the top. Now, do we have a full show for you today? Of course, right? So, will we talk about Joe Lieberman and how he's going to try to block the public option? Yes. Will we talk about how we're going to try to get beyond Joe Lieberman right off the top in a second, okay? And then New York Times calls Alan Grayson a wingnut, and then we're going to show you some real wingnuts in the Republican Party. And then, of course, and you know what? Today's a dramatic day as well. I have a new decision on Afghanistan. Uh-oh. That's going to get unveiled later in the program. All right. Now, having said that, it's time. It's time to unleash the TYT Army. Let's go to war. Now, here's the situation, guys. We got the TYT Army, and from time to time we charge here and there. But, you know, we haven't made a public appearance yet. And it's time to make that public appearance. Here's why. Right now, the House and the Senate are on the verge of voting on the public option. And we got guys like Joe Lieberman who are desperately trying to block it. We've got an administration that appears to be non-committal. And it could go either way, especially in the Senate, where a couple of corporatist Democrats could join the Republicans in a filibuster, and then they say, hey, look, in order to compromise, we take out the public option. That is a very, I don't want to say it's very likely, but certainly that is a very strong possibility. Let's put it that way, right? So now how are we going to try to fight back against it? Well, you remember in the summer, all the crazy right-wingers showed up, and then all of a sudden the news started covering it like everybody hated the public option. Now, there was poll after poll, and I'm going to quote you the polls here in a second, that all said, hey, you know what? A great majority of the American people are behind the public option. But all they saw was the right-wingers in the town halls. And so we became, or the majority of Americans, the silent majority. Well, I think it's time to stop being so silent. I think it's time to charge ahead. So, here's our plan. We want to go to CNN headquarters in Atlanta, New York, Los Angeles, all at Thursday noon local time. So in New York, it'll be at noon Eastern, obviously, in Atlanta, noon Eastern, and in LA, 3 hours later at noon Pacific, okay? And we want you guys to show up. If you want the public option, this is the time. We got to fight for it. And you know what the press pays attention to? People in front of cameras. And you know where's a good place to find cameras? CNN. Okay, I'm keeping it real. So let's put up the addresses, Jesus. These are the places that we want you to go. And what we've done is we've set up a Facebook event that shows you how you can get in touch with other people and see who else is going from your area. That's New York, obviously, 10 Columbus Circle. And then you have Atlanta, where it's 190 Marietta Street, I should say. And that's at noon p.m. Eastern as well. And then in Los Angeles, noon Pacific, we're going to go to 6430 West Sunset Boulevard. And I'll be there, of course, and a lot of the Young Turks crew will be there. And let's show them what we got. I mean, let's charge ahead. It's time. It's time. Now, why are we going to CNN? Partly because the cameras are there. I'm going to keep it real with you again. But partly because, look, it's their job. They claim to be the most trusted name in news, right? And Erica Hill, one of their anchors, said earlier, hey, you know what? Let me give you the exact quote. Well, why is it so unpopular, referring to the public option? Now, that's absurd, because let me give you the polls right now. 55% in the latest Washington Post ABC News poll in favor of the public option. 65% in the New York Times CBS poll. 77% in Surveys USA. 72% in the CBS New York Times poll from earlier. 56% in Washington Post ABC News poll from earlier as well. Quinnipiac, 62%. And then Time Magazine, 56%. All of them, large majorities of the American people saying, hey, this is our will. And this is a democracy. So, one, we need CNN to make clear to everybody, hey, you know what? This is what the obvious majority of the American people want, and I don't think they've made that clear enough yet. And number two, when a senator or congressman comes on CNN, they've got to get asked the question. If they're going to vote against the public option, hey, why are you going to go against the will of the American majority? Now, they might have an answer for that, but I want to know what that answer is. They got to answer that question. Clear majority of the American people want the public option. Now, why are you against it? And why are you going to vote against the will of the majority? Now, unfortunately, we can't get them to ask these questions unless we show up. So, what TV news likes is people, and they like events. So let's give them an event. Let's give them people. So let's go to Atlanta, New York, and LA this Thursday, November 5th. Now, we're going to have more information on this, and we already do, on our website, on theyoungturks.com. First blog that you see right in the middle there tells you why we're doing it, where you can go, and the Facebook event page where you can talk to others that are in your area to attend the event. Now, we'll have more information about this a little bit later in the week, and we'll continue to post videos on it and update that blog post for you guys. And we're looking forward to the ideas that you come up with, signs that you come up with. We'll let you know about that. And later in the week, we're also going to talk about a tweet bomb. Uh-oh. First ever. Young Turks came up with it. We'll explain later in the week. So let's move forward. TYT Army. It's time to ride. All right. Let's see what happens, man. Let's punch him in the mouth and see where we go.
Not only are we going to New Hampshire, Tom Harkin, we're going to South Carolina and Oklahoma and Arizona and North Dakota and New Mexico. We're going to California and Texas and New York. And we're going to South Dakota and Oregon and Washington and Michigan. And then we're going to Washington, D.C. to take back the White House.
Yeah! Mount up! Mount up, soldiers. All right. And you know what? I'm looking forward to meeting people there, too. And that could be a very interesting event in a lot of different ways. Yeah, it's basically the first time we're showing up somewhere, and so that's going to be fun. And by the way, Howard Dean is right. If this works and we, get good coverage and it helps in getting the public option passed, and it helps in changing the conversation in the country and getting the politicians to realize, hey, wait a minute now, this is the clear desire of the American people, then you know what? We take it state by state, and we're coming to your house. Okay, but we'll do that next. Let's start with this. So everybody join up and let us know where you're going to go. Okay, now let's move forward. I'm going to get back to the public option with Joe Lieberman because, of course, he said nonsense things. And Lieberman is a big part of this because, we got to make an example out of somebody. You can't go around single-handedly killing health care reform or, in order to compromise with him killing the public option and get away with it. There's got to be a political price to pay. And if we're not going to make him pay it, who is? So we're going to get back to him in a little bit. But meanwhile, speaking of people who are taking on the establishment and people who are taking on Republicans, et cetera, Alan Grayson got an article in the New York Times over the weekend. Week in Review, New York Times, Sunday New York Times, big article, Alan Grayson. And you're like, oh, right, they're covering him, all right. Alan Grayson, the liberals' problem child. And it goes on to characterize him as a wingnut and ask the question of how are the Democrats going to deal with this problem? Oh, so Democrat gets a spine for the first time in decades, and that's their new problem? And I'll take that problem any day of the week. Okay. And, to be fair to some of the Democrats said, oh, this is really uncivil, and I've got issues with it, and I want to get back to a civil debate where we regularly got our ass handed to us. Now, they have those quotes, but they have some other Democratic leaders, some on the record and off the record, saying, you know what? He's going around punching people in the mouth. Maybe that's not such a bad thing. To which I say, of course, of course. They had a good quote, as usual, from Barney Frank at the end. And he said, I welcome Grayson's taking the fight to them. I think he's got to be a little bit more careful about his punches, but I'm glad he's throwing them. So, overall, that's exactly right, Barney Frank. We've got some more from Alan Grayson in a little bit as well. You know what? I'm going to do what – I'll tell you. See, I'm going to do the Alan Grayson section now, okay, the substantive section, because it's a perfect example of why he's not a wingnut. Now, he says in the article, but you can't compare me to the guys that don't make any sense. Listen to my arguments. If you say the arguments don't make any sense, all right, then we're having a conversation. But they do make sense. And do you know, first of all, he only has degrees from Harvard and Harvard Law School. Now, that doesn't mean that he's de facto smart, but we've seen him in action, right? He's nobody's dummy. And did you know that I did not know this until I read the article. United States Court of Appeals clerk he was for 3 different justices. Ruth Bader Ginsburg, liberal justice, makes sense. You want to know the other 2? Antonin Scalia and Robert Bork. Okay, I mean, if you want to characterize this guy as a, fringe guy, which they're definitely going to want to do, because why? He's going after the establishment, so the establishment wants to strike back. You can go ahead and do that, but, well, I was going to say you're going after the wrong guy, but I think maybe you are going after the right guy, because if you're the establishment, you better be scared of Alan Grayson, because he's coming for you. He's coming. Okay, now, he was holding hearings. This was actually a couple of months back, but he did a great job with it, and he had the very famous economist Nassim Taleb on with him, and they were talking about finance. And the reason I bring this up now is get a load of the smart questions that Grayson's going to ask here. He's got a full grasp of the issues, not just in healthcare reform, but also in financial reforms. Perhaps that's why they're scared of him. But first, the first part of this is actually Taleb talking about the so-called talent on Wall Street. It's really funny, and I wanted to share that with you guys. He's basically making the case that, what talent? Where the hell are they going to go? So let's go to clip number 5 first.
Derivatives, high-income people other than use them as drivers, but even then, I mean, you can use someone less reckless as a driver. So I don't know what to use them for. Honestly, I don't know what is the I was on Wall Street for 21 years, right? And there are a lot of people I wouldn't use for anything. I don't know if you have some suggestions. So I don't know what you're competing against, all right? And you have high unemployment on Wall Street. And calling that talent is it's a very strange use of language. People who lost 4.3 trillion worldwide in a profession, and then calling it talent. So there's talent in generating bonuses, definitely, that you cannot deny. But other than that, I don't know.
I love this guy, man. And he's right. He's like, wait, talent in what? They generate bonuses for one another. So yeah, that's talent, right? But other than that, they're not really creating anything. All they're doing is creating more money for themselves. Okay, so then Grayson's going to come in and start questioning him here. And he has a very interesting question. And as you'll see from the very beginning, it's the kind of language that I love. Clip number 6.
Mr. Grayson.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. We're talking today about what proper incentive structures we should have on Wall Street. And I'm wondering if we're talking too much about carrots and not enough about sticks. In fact, people on Wall Street did lose over $4 trillion of our money, and I've seen almost no one punished for it. Don't you think that it would be likely to deter bad behavior and an overly fond view of risks if we actually punished people?
I'm not a legal scholar, but there got to be a way to. There's something called malpractice. Okay, there got to be a way where we can go after these people. I haven't seen so far because people are scared of because Wall Street has talents. So these people would run away, would go to Monte Carlo or something. So we're afraid of getting them, of them running away. But we should be starting. We should be doing it immediately. Find people who made, like a chairman of an executive committee of a firm that we had to support, who made $120 million of bonuses and supervised unfettered risk-taking, and make sure that the gentleman returns $120 million of bonuses. One single, the place where my idea was most popular was Switzerland. There's the first event of a clawback in any country took place in Switzerland, where the authorities went to Mr. Marcel Ospel, head of UBS, after the events of October, and told him, listen, give us 12 million Swiss francs, please. And it was voluntary, and he gave back almost or large share of his opus. He clawed back his bonuses.
All right, first, I love this guy. I love the hand motions. He's like, what is this? Where's the talent? I guess we could make them cab drivers. Where are they going to go? Monte Carlo? Where are they going? This is, of course, Nassim Taleb. He wrote The Black Swan that accurately predicted what was going to happen on Wall Street when everybody said no one could have seen it coming. He saw it coming, right? And he makes a very important point there. It's like, look, they get a $120 million bonus for something that they did disastrously. So why can't we take the money back? And people say, oh, no, you can't do that. He's like, oh, really? I have a case right here in Switzerland where they went and took the money back. And he answers the question of, what can you do about it? Well, maybe it's malpractice. Maybe there's a lot of things you could do about it if you cared to do something about it. He's exactly right about that. You know, that's might be TYT Army task number 2. Let's go get the money back. Okay, now how would that be for an accomplishment? All right, let's save that for another day. But one more clip here. Continuing Grayson's questioning, Taleb is going to address the collective incompetence of Wall Street, another clip that I loved from this hearing.
Dr. Slab.
Yes, well, the problem I saw, and I wrote about, actually, in one of my writings, not yet published, I say it's easier to fool a million than fool a person. And it's much easier to fool people with billions than to fool them with millions. Why? Because you have bandwagon effects, and you have collective, something called diffusion and collective responsibility. And I'll tell you exactly why. If you have what risk managers are doing is make sure they do exactly what other risk managers do. So if there's a mistake, it's a mistake that they did not commit individually, but committed that they had company on that, we call it company on a trade. It's not like an individual doctor who's just incompetent. It's collective incompetence. We had collective risk management incompetence, but they were all doing what other people. The hedge is to do what the other guy's doing.
Now, that is so important because you see that in so many different fields, right? You'll see it honestly, in media too. Well, you know, I hired the bigger star. I don't know if it's going to work, but that's what everybody else is doing, so you can't really fire me for it. And so they don't want to take risks in that sense with their jobs, but that they're willing to countenance failure because they don't mind if the company fails as much as whether they keep their own job, right? And that's also in Wall Street. And then you see it in crime sometimes. There's the famous case where the woman who was, raped in New York, and everybody saw it. In fact, there was a similar case in California very recently, and everybody looked around and did nothing, and no one even called the police because everybody thought, well, somebody else called the police, and I'm just going to do what everybody else does. And so it's easier, as he pointed out, for the whole industry to do this than rather than one person. One person does it, they're Bernie Madoff. The whole industry does it, well, then it's legitimate. And if they steal only millions, well, then you're a small-time robber. If you steal billions, well, that's part of the system. I mean, this guy knows what he's talking about, and the guy questioning him, Alan Grayson, also knows what he's talking about. Now, to take the guy like Alan Grayson, who's this thoughtful and is this prepared on these issues, and to call him a wingnut and to compare him to the Republican crazies, well, it's, it's journalistic negligence. And funny enough, it's that diffusion of collective responsibility that Taleb talked about, but in the media. In that story about Alan Grayson, they mentioned 2 so-called wingnuts on the left and 2 wingnuts on the right. And they said, see, balance. Look, I know balance is fake sometimes, but hey, you know what? At least I appear to be neutral, and that's what everybody else is doing. And they mentioned Pete Stark. Comparing him to Michelle Bachmann? Are you crazy? I'm going to show you a clip now from Virginia Fox in a second, and you're going to see what real crazy is all about. Now, look, I give you an example from the weekend. It's kind of a funny example, but it illustrates the point. We're in Manhattan Beach here in Los Angeles with my parents, and we want to go to Hermosa Beach for a second, but my parents have to catch a plane soon, so there's a little bit of a debate as to whether we should go or not. Now, I know from experience that Hermosa Beach is right next to Manhattan Beach. So it's going to take, I predict, 2 minutes to get there. My dad went there once a while back, but doesn't quite remember, but he's worried that we're going to be late to the airport, so he does this classic exaggeration. He says, no, you're crazy. It'll take 45 minutes to get to Hermosa Beach. Now, if you know anything about LA geography, you know that ain't even close to true, right? So now, if you were the mainstream media, what would you do? If my dad's Republican and I'm the Democrat and I say 2 minutes and he says 45 minutes, well, you split it down the middle and I go, say, I guess it's going to take a little over 20 minutes, right? I'm just being neutral. Some say 2, some say 45. Now, how long did it really take? Have to confess here, I was off by 50%. It took 3 minutes. So the answer is not always in the middle. Maybe there's an answer that's clearly on one side, but that would take courage to write about that. Instead, we have collective negligence on the part of the media that always splits it down the middle. Now, let's show you Virginia Fox and see if it is in any way comparable to anything the Democrats have done. She's going to go with the same old scare tactics. She's done this before. Look at how many times she mentions fear, and then get a load of the last thing she says, which will blow you away. Here we go.
Everywhere I go in my district, people tell me they are frightened. They are frightened about what is happening in this country. They fear for the future of our country. What they're talking about is that they fear for our freedoms, and they fear for the principles that formed this country and have always been the basis on which we've operated. I share that fear, and I believe they should be fearful. And I believe that the greatest fear that we all should have to our freedom comes from this room, this very room, and what may happen later this week in terms of a tax increase bill masquerading as a health care bill. I believe we have more to fear from the potential of that bill passing than we do from any terrorist right now in any country.
We have more to fear from reforming our health care system so that hopefully you all get better health care for lower prices, hopefully. We have more to fear from that than any terrorist in any country. Presumably that includes Osama bin Laden, Ayman al-Zawahiri, the people who did the 9/11 attacks. No, health care reform, trying to make the health care system better, is worse than terrorism, worse than 9/11. Look, that's extremism. That's backed by nothing. No substance whatsoever, no facts, just absolute fear-mongering. But in case it wasn't clear, I lost count at one point, but I believe she said fear or frightened 10 times in under a minute. 10 times. I am very afraid. You should be very afraid. Afraid, fear, frightened. Be frightened. The Democrats are coming. The Democrats are coming. They're going to try to improve your health care. Fear. It's worse than terrorists. That's exactly what the current day Republican Party has to offer. That's a wingnut. That's extremism. And if you can't tell the difference between that and Alan Grayson, well, either you're being disingenuous and you know the difference, you're just afraid to say it, or I can't help you because you lack logical reasoning ability. And I don't know, get an education? I don't know. Try to get some help for yourself. But you can't compare that to anything that the Democrats do, and that is what the Republicans do day in, day out. That's all they got for you. Fear. Young Turks.
Buster ass tricks, sleep with the fishes.
All right, back on the Young Turks. We're going to dive back into the public option in a second, but first I want to play you a clip from David Vitter. You remember the Al Franken amendment saying, hey, if you're a defense contractor, you need to be able to give people who have suffered rape or sexual assault in your workplace a forum in civil courts. You can't just push them into arbitration where the companies win a great majority of the time because they pay the arbitrators, and you need to give them a hearing. Now, shockingly enough, this should have been a very, very simple and obvious bill that passed easily. Had 30 Republicans vote against it. Of course, no Democrats, but 30 Republicans said, no, if you suffer sexual assault or rape at work, you should go into arbitration anyway. And David Vitter actually said publicly, he's the Republican from Louisiana, well, if it was just rape, I'd think about it, but, you know, if it's other forms of sexual assault, then you really need to go to arbitration and not bring this into the U.S. court system. That would seem to be an incredibly heinous quote. And in fact, funny enough, it's been perceived as such in Louisiana. I mean, the Republicans have escaped harm so often for whatever they say. I remember when Bush said, I'm not concerned about Osama bin Laden. And he never caught any flack for that, which is amazing, right? But in this case, a lot of the newspapers in Louisiana have said, and including some of the ones that are not known to be on the left side, have said, hey, you know what, this vote is fairly indefensible. And you should try to defend it because right now you haven't really tried and it looks really bad. So a constituent of his went up to him and asked him about it. Now, as it turns out, she was a rape victim. So obviously she takes this very personally, as she should. And she's going to ask him a direct question, and he's going to run for the hills. Let's watch.
Senator, I'm a rape victim. I need to ask you for other people.
Because all these things have a lot to do with it. There's a lot more image than
And it meant everything to me that I was able to put the person who attacked me in prison. And what allowed me to do that was our judicial process. I showed up at court every day to make sure that happened.
And I'm absolutely supportive of any case like that being prosecuted criminally to the full extent of the law. And nothing in that amendment prevents criminal.
How can you support a company that tells a rape victim that she does not have the right to defend herself?
Ma'am, the language in question did not say that.
But it's unconstitutional to have a clause that says a woman does not have the right to defend themselves.
Do you realize President Obama was against that amendment and his administration was against that amendment?
But I'm not asking Obama, I'm asking you.
Do you think he's in favor of rape?
I am asking you, Senator.
What about the woman with cancer?
What if it was your daughter that was raped? Would you tell her to be quiet?
What about the woman with cancer, Senator? Thank you, Senator.
Would you tell your daughter to be silent?
Is there a chance that
He said, well, you know, President Obama is also in favor of that. That is not true. Of course, I know, you're shocked, right? Now, it is a little complicated, and for which the Obama administration should take some flack, don't get me wrong. The Defense Department said, oh, well, it's going to be hard to administer this. Boo-hoo. You know how much the Defense Department administers, especially when they're giving our money away to the military-industrial complex? A hell of a lot. Now, all of a sudden, this is tough to administer? Please, right? But the Obama administration, the White House itself, came out and said, no, we are definitely in favor of this amendment that Franken put forward. Now, if you are, you better get your Defense Department under control. But that does not address at all what she asked the senator. Why did you vote against it? I'm not asking you about Obama or his Defense Department or whoever put out a statement from either side there. I'm asking why did you vote against it? Look, it didn't take that long. Why don't you just give an answer? If you have a good answer and you say you don't like the language, well, what part of the language did you not like? You have a perfect opportunity there. Give us an answer. And he didn't. Instead, he ran. He ran because it's an indefensible vote. You know, look, if the Democrats know what they're doing, they will press on issues like this. And you know what the Republicans would do if the shoe was on the other foot. He's running in 2010, right? His opponent, if he was a Democrat, what the Republicans would do is Senator Vitter in favor of rape. And they'd run that ad over and over and over again. You think they wouldn't? Then you haven't been paying attention. Now, if you ask me what's reality, no. Senator Vitter, as far as I know, is not in favor of rape. That's too strong. But he is in favor of taking women who have been sexually assaulted at work, including rape, including Jamie Lee Jones, who was gang raped when she worked for KBR in Iraq. That's a subsidiary of Halliburton. And denying those women our justice system, whether it's in this case, the civil justice system, and pushing them into arbitration where they are overwhelmingly likely to lose. And that's hideous. And if you're a woman voter or a male voter in Louisiana, what does that say about David Vitter? And do you want to vote for a guy like that? Very fair questions. All right, now, let's, you know what, now that we're asking fair questions, John Krakauer has a fair question to ask of General McChrystal. He is a very famous author. You might know some of his books, Into Thin Air, among others, and he's now written a book about the Pat Tillman situation and how he was killed in Afghanistan, and he explains in the book that it was, of course, friendly fire, and they knew that instantly, as he's about to tell you, within 24-hour period. And General McChrystal, in order to give him a Pat Tillman Silver Star, basically for propaganda purposes, and the administration made it very, very clear to the generals in charge there, and McChrystal was specifically in charge of that determination, hey, we need some good news at home, okay? So let's make a hero out of this guy, and let's play it for all we got. And in his book, which I've read parts of, Krakauer explains how they played it up for political purposes and what advantages they gained from it. So now McChrystal's on the record as saying, well, I don't know, it was an honest mistake. That's what they're going to address on Meet the Press from this weekend. Here's Krakauer talking to, why am I blanking? David Gregory, thank you. Talking to David Gregory on Meet the Press. Here you go.
After Tillman died, the most important thing to know is that within 24 hours certainly, everybody on the ground, everyone intimately involved knew it was friendly fire. There's never any doubt that it was friendly fire. McChrystal was told within 24 hours it was friendly fire. Also immediately they started this paperwork to give Tillman a Silver Star. And the Silver Star ended up being at the center of the cover-up. McChrystal, Tillman faced this devastating fire from his own guys, and he tried to protect a young private by exposing himself to this fire. That's why he was killed, and the private wasn't. Without friendly fire, there's no valor, there's no Silver Star. There was no enemy fire, yet McChrystal authored, he closely supervised over a number of days, this fraudulent medal recommendation that talked about devastating enemy fire.
And that's the important piece of it. And he actually testified earlier this year before the Senate, and this is what he said about it.
Now, what happens in retrospect is, and I would do this differently if I had the chance again, in retrospect, they look contradictory because we sent a Silver Star that was not well written, and although I went through the process, I will tell you now I didn't review the citation well enough to capture, or I didn't catch, that if you read it, you can imply that it was not friendly fire.
Even those who are critical of him and the Army say they don't think he willfully deceived anyone.
That's correct. He's just said now he didn't read this hugely important document about the most famous soldier in the military. He didn't read it carefully enough to notice that it talked about enemy fire instead of friendly fire. That's preposterous. That's not believable.
All right.
I love that. And he's right. Oh, really? The most famous soldier that we had in Afghanistan or Iraq, one that Donald Rumsfeld had told McChrystal, hey, make sure you look out for him, okay? You didn't notice whether it was friendly fire or enemy fire that killed him while you were writing up a Silver Star recommendation? And especially a guy as careful as General McChrystal? Come on. I mean, look, you'd have to be a fool to believe that, or part of the mainstream press, and you don't want to say, oh my God, General McChrystal is lying. Because, you know, that would, oh God, accusing General McChrystal of lying in that case, oh, that'd be terrible. Now, that doesn't mean General McChrystal's strategy is wrong in Afghanistan. Doesn't mean he's a bad guy necessarily. But did he lie about that? Hell yeah. There's no question about that. Krakauer calls it like it is. And since he's famous, he gets a little bit of attention for it. Now, these facts were actually evident before. We covered them before. But if somebody famous doesn't back it up, then it doesn't have as much credibility. But hey, God bless Krakauer. Did a great job in exposing it. And so you should know that about McChrystal. I mean, it's a relevant data point. So now on to McChrystal and his recommendation in Afghanistan. Well, we got trouble over there. The latest development is that Karzai has been officially declared the winner of the election. Now, what happened? We were supposed to have a runoff this weekend. Well, his opponent, Abdullah, has withdrawn. And he says he wasn't going to get a fair election. He might be right about that. But I'll tell you what, I'm not sure he played the politics of this right. Because as soon as he withdrew, if he was expecting some sort of international support, he did not get it. The White House and the rest of the international community saying, well, all right, then that's that. And Karzai's the official leader and the legitimate leader of Afghanistan. And it was obvious in what the White House said through Gibbs that they were pissed at Abdullah from withdrawing. They said, look, we went through all this effort to make sure that there was a runoff. And we pressured Karzai and we pressured him. We got the runoff, and now you're going to leave the runoff. On the other hand, I feel some sympathy towards Abdullah because was he going to get a fair runoff? Not even close. They were going to rig it just like they did before. So he's kind of in a no-win situation. But as it stands, it's over. Abdullah is out. Karzai is in. Everybody recognizes him. And I now officially changed my position on Afghanistan. It's over. We got to go. Whoever wants to stay. Whoever wants to run. Okay, now we're done. Karzai is totally corrupt. His brother is totally corrupt. He has no popular backing, no support. And there's basically a very complicated civil war going on in Afghanistan. If I thought we had a leader, and I've said this a million times, that's why I'm officially changing my position. I thought if we have a leader in Afghanistan that we can work with, that actually represents as best as we can. I don't live in a perfect world. I don't need it to be ideal. But as best as we can, the will of the Afghani people, then I can stay. And we invaded that country. We need to make the situation better. We can do investments in education, counterinsurgency, etc., rat out the Taliban, etc. But if you don't have somebody you could work with in the Afghanistan government, well, it's a losing battle. I mean, there's no way in the world you're going to win. So you're going to keep propping up a guy that the people themselves don't believe in. And what's the point of that? Matthew Ho, who was a diplomat in Afghanistan, recently resigned, and he said, look, a lot of the people in Afghanistan are very wary and historically wary of outsiders. They're fighting us because we're there. And then we're fighting them because they're fighting us. And they're fighting us because we're fighting them. It's like, it's ridiculous. And so what happens if we win and we crush all these guys and we hand all the power to Karzai? Is that a better Afghanistan? I'm not convinced of that. I think the people in Afghanistan are not convinced of that. So it's pointless now. Oh, should we do counterterrorism in Afghanistan and in Pakistan? Hell yeah. And should we withdraw in a smart and credible fashion and give us enough time to root out as much of the al-Qaeda and Taliban leadership as we can? Yes. But should we stay there in the long term and continue to lose not only American dollars, but much more importantly, American lives there for what is now a lost cause? No. We got to go. So that is the new TYT position. Oh, I could feel the tremors through the national dialogue now. Did you hear TYT changed their position? Oh my God, they say withdraw now. All right, go ahead and blog it out and see what happens. We'll be right back, Young Turks. All right, back on the Young Turks. All right, let me give you one more wingnut here. Let's go to Rush Limbaugh. It doesn't get any better than this. Fox News Channel basically gave an open forum to attack the president over the weekend. Shocking, I know, because then they had, don't worry though, they had Tom Hartman on for a half an hour afterwards, just to give us some balance. Oh, wait, they didn't? Oh, well, that's weird. Okay, so they let him go at it for a half an hour, but then we had a fun little moment where they asked him if he was jealous of Glenn Beck. I'm having fun. Let's watch.
When you look at Glenn Beck and you see this explosion, what do you feel?
Well, I'm kind of proud.
No envy, no competition.
No. I mean, my radio audience is astronomically high. Look at 1988. There was nobody doing what I'm doing. Nobody. You had CNN was the only cable network, and you had the three networks and the newspapers. And now look what's out. All of this conservative media, conservative talk radio, television, Fox News, the conservative blogosphere. I mean, in one way, I could, if I wanted to have my ego be as big as Obama's is, I could say, look what I created. So any success out there on my side, conservative media, damn, if it's going to help us get this country back, bring more in.
If his ego was as large as Obama's. I mean, he's just saying. He's not saying anything. He's saying, I could say that it's all because of me, but, you know, of course I wouldn't because, I'm not nearly as egotistical as Obama. Right. And by the way, did you notice that he put Fox News in there with conservative media? Wait a minute. All right, so at least he makes that admission. Look, it's obvious that, and I didn't think it was obvious before I watched that clip, actually. But from that clip, it was obvious to me that of course he's jealous of it. And he's thinking, it's me, I did it all, it was me. And he never made it on TV. That's one of the things he's bitter about. He certainly didn't make it on ESPN, of course, when they brought him in to do some commentary, but he also had his own television show, and it was a total failure. So, sad day for Rush Limbaugh. But overall, look, he's still right. He is the granddaddy of the conservative media movement, and he was there a forerunner to all those guys. So, you know what? That's the one thing, if he wanted to take credit for it, he can, and he should. Keeping it real. All right, now, I think we have time for one more thing here. I love what Lawrence O'Donnell did to Liz Cheney over the weekend. Or actually, I think it was on Friday night. And Liz Cheney had criticized Obama for going to Dover Airport and saluting as the soldiers came home. Of course, they got the permission of the family. Otherwise, they can't do it, to show those caskets. And, of course, the Bush administration never showed them because they wanted to hide the true cost of war. So after Liz Cheney criticized Obama, Lawrence O'Donnell went house on her. Here's clip number one.
When President Obama honored our Afghanistan war dead by taking part in a military ritual at Dover Air Force Base yesterday, it was easily predictable that a Republican would criticize him for it. And in our fourth story on the countdown, the former vice president's pet attack dog, his daughter Liz Cheney, has now done just that. And once again, she wasn't going to let the facts get in her way. On the John Gibson radio show yesterday, Ms. Cheney was rehashing her father's fact-free critique of President Obama's handling of the war in Afghanistan. Then Mr. Gibson asked her about the president's appearance at Dover Air Force Base.
I don't know why he went to Dover. I mean, I think that clearly it is very important for our commander-in-chief whenever he can, in whatever way possible, to pay tribute to our fallen soldiers, our fallen military folks. But I think, you know, what President Bush used to do was to do it without the cameras. And I don't understand sort of showing up with the White House press pool with photographers and asking family members if you can take pictures. That's really hard for me to get my head around. I think it's an honorable and important thing for us to pay tribute. There's no greater sacrifice people make to the nation. But it was a surprising way for the president to choose to do it.
As we mentioned yesterday, President Bush never went to Dover Air Force Base to honor dead American soldiers on their final journey home. And Vice President Cheney never did either. Hey, Liz, have you ever lost a relative in battle? I have. My cousin Johnny, West Point graduate, just like his father before him. I wish the president or the vice president had met his casket on the way home. You know what never means, Liz? It means zero. It means that in over 7 years of 2 wars, your dad never left the comfort of his White House office or the vice president's mansion and got himself up to Dover to bear witness to how his warmongering fell on families of dead American soldiers. Never, not once. Liz, don't let your dad do this to you. Don't let him parade you onto the stage to defend the indefensible. Let him suffer the full weight of the shame that we know he must feel when he watches Barack Obama do what he never had the decency to do. President Bush did meet with grieving military families in private, and he went to military hospitals to visit the wounded. As for Ms. Cheney's reference to cameras, the policy of banning media coverage of coffins continued unaltered throughout the Bush administration. Thus, even families that wanted media coverage of their loved one's ceremony were not given any choice in the matter. Furthermore, President Obama did not make any special requests to any of yesterday's 18 families, as Ms. Cheney implies. I mean, lies. The vast majority of those families had already made their individual decisions about media coverage under the current policy before the notification that President Obama would be part of the ceremony. As for Dick Cheney, when he was vice president, he sometimes met with the war wounded, but like President Bush, he never went to Dover either. Never. And a reminder, Mr. Cheney successfully sought out 5 deferments from the draft to avoid having to serve his country in the Vietnam War. Mr. Cheney's 5th and final deferment, a result of his wife becoming pregnant with Liz. Mr. Cheney was granted a 3A status, the hardship exemption by his draft board, which was available to men with children at that time.
The Cousin Johnny story was excellent. And Loris, how many times did Dick Cheney go to Dover? Oh, he never went. Okay, I got you. It's fairly clear from your presentation that he didn't go. So, I mean, look, that's the thing about Liz Cheney. She'll drop in there like, oh, you know, he brings the cameras. You know, we went. The implication is we went all the time, but without the cameras. But that's just not true at all. You never went. And so, I mean, they lie. They lie all the time, right? And it's sickening. And all those people that he sent to die, Dick Cheney views them as, you know, pieces to move around the chessboard. They're not really human beings to him. If you're going to send them to war and they're going to die, whether it's in Afghanistan or Iraq, whether it's a decision to send them to war or a decision to keep them in war, you have to at least have the decency to go meet their caskets every once in a while and to meet their family and talk to them about the sacrifices that their family members made. So I think it was a point very well made by Lawrence O'Donnell. My guess is that it is not going to affect the Cheney family very much, and they'll continue their to spread their usual lies about Afghanistan, Iraq, and Obama. Young Turks.